Hello, I'm Toycat, and most people picture migration as being from poor countries to relatively wealthier ones. However, there is actually a whole simultaneous market of immigration for millionaires and high net worth individuals, and right now they are fleeing Britain in their thousands. This is a whole article from CNN that basically summarizes one chart that you can see. This is from Henley and Partners, and it measures high net worth individuals and their movements across the world. This is people who are US dollar millionaires, which, just as a fun fact, means that in the UK, this is the wrong graph, in the UK, you can be a millionaire without being a millionaire. You know, you can have less than £1 million, but have more than $1 million US dollars. And the reverse is true in Australia, where you can be a millionaire without being a US dollar millionaire. Just keep that in mind as we go through this, because as you can see, there are two countries that are losing millionaires in very, very large quantities. And China isn't surprised. So red is losing and green is millionaires entering. China is not surprising to anyone, right? Like, yes, everyone knows that as people get wealthier, they value freedom more. And as you live in a country that has a one-party state that if you criticize, you might go missing, people want to move their money elsewhere. And so, you know, again, even if you're really on board of the regime, you have to admit that that's a natural consequence of it. You know, there are some surprises like Russia and India, but the biggest one of all, I think, you know, even Taiwan and South Korea, why are people leaving those in large quantities? But the most surprising one is the UK, where 9,500 millionaires left, and per capita, that is so much higher than China. If you think about it, having 2/3 of the millionaires leaving of China, but having 1/20 of the population means something is going wrong, at least for wealthy people in this country. What exactly is it? I think every time this comes up and wealthy people simplify it down as taxes, right? But there's actually a little bit more to it than that, at least more than people say, because yeah, taxes are a part of the factor, but people will bring things up like, yeah, well, what, you know, we have a lower than average corporation tax rate, and we're looking to raise it, and so clearly that's why billionaires are leaving. But even though we are trying to go from a below average tax rate to a very slightly above average one, weirdly enough, this isn't that big of a deal. Corporations already pay the corporation tax they want to, because you know, even though that's trying to be changed, the OECD is bringing in a global minimum tax for multinational enterprises, and the basic goal is to stop companies doing what Starbucks does, where they say, oh yes, we are Starbucks and we made 10 billion in the UK, but it just so happens, what a crazy coincidence, that we actually don't own the Starbucks name, and Starbucks Luxembourg happens to own that name, and oh, Luxembourgish Starbucks wants to charge us 10 billion to use it this year. Oh darn, that means we make no money in the UK, so there's no corporation tax due, and I guess that Luxembourg, where there happens to be a much lower tax rate, I guess that's where they'll pay the tax instead. And oh, we're owned by the same organization? Well, that's just a weird coincidence, isn't it? And so ultimately, like, corporation tax is something which corporations bother with at their own level, and also corporations aren't individuals. They will exist in the countries that they need to make the money that they need to, whereas individuals get to only live in one place. Unlike Starbucks, which can be domiciled everywhere in the globe it wants to as different companies, individuals have to pick somewhere in the world to live, and so most people will point to the top income tax rate as being the biggest determiner of where people choose to live. If you pay a high personal tax rate, not for your company, but for you as an individual, then you are not going to like living somewhere, and so in the UK we do have one of the higher ones in the world, 45% above £125,000 if you're curious, and it means that, yeah, as a result, we have a higher than average top income tax rate, but not like that much higher. I mean, there's only a few countries above us, and it's like, you know, it really is like Sweden and the Netherlands, and then like, you got very few choices if you want a higher tax than the UK, and so as a result, if you move basically anywhere, you're going to save some money. And fun fact, one of the most ridiculous things about the UK is how close you will live to a tax haven if you're living here. Here is my home logo. That's not where I actually live, by the way, I hope. But as you can see, living here in the biggest city in the UK, I've got the tax jurisdiction of Jersey, where there is basically no tax, the Isle of Man, where there's basically half, if not even less taxes, and a lot of people will just have it pointed out to them regularly, like, why don't you just move to the Isle of Man? There was a post on the UK personal finance subreddit to be like, yeah, just so you know, we put together this personal tax calculator to let you know how much you would save, and if you take the average UK salary of £37,000, then you save like a little bit of money, about £1,000 a year. It's not that much when you consider moving there, but if you're a high earner, then when you talk about income tax, it's a huge difference. And so individuals will look at this £22,000 a year for doing the same job, just even really with the same currency, in the same language and the same everything else, except in a different tax jurisdiction, and say, why am I living here rather than living over there? I get no personal allowance at that income level, I pay double as much income tax, and after the government takes about a third of my money for income tax, they say to me again, then, oh, by the way, we need some money to pay for the NHS and pensions and stuff. And if you say to them, like, isn't that what tax should cover? They say, nah, bro, just us. You're gonna have to pay us this money. And so as a result, looking at income taxes, a lot of people would say this is clearly why millionaires are leaving the green countries to move to the yellow countries, which if you cross-reference this map with this one, it does look pretty favorable, right? The US and Canada are both fairly, they're in orange and yellow respectively, which is kind of misleading, by the way, because Canada has provincial taxes, which are quite high. But they're in yellow and orange respectively. If you look at the UAE, they're at less than 10%. And okay, where are they on this map? Are they the biggest gainer in the world? Yes, they are. What about Australia? Okay, it's a green. It's the same color as the UK, actually. But it works out for a lot of people as higher thresholds, so they gain a lot of people. Ultimately, taxes are a part of it, but they're clearly not the biggest part of it, or people would be moving exclusively to Oman and Saudi Arabia and the occasional, like, Brazil or whatever. But instead, people are leaving Brazil, where the tax rate is 25 to 30%, and moving to Japan, where the tax rate is 40 to 45. Here's the people leaving Brazil, here's the people moving to Japan. It's probably not exactly in that direction, but you get the idea that income taxes could be a part of it, but they're still missing the biggest problem with, again, millionaires, and that is that you're usually a millionaire not because you earn $1 million in a year. This is something that I think a lot of people get mixed up when they talk about tax. They're like, yeah, we should tax those people who have a lot of money by income, but income is only what you earn when you're, like, upper middle class and you have an employer or whatever. Most very wealthy people get there because they have a business or they have assets. Like I kind of mentioned before, like 772,000 in assets. It sounds like a lot when you say it like that, but then you compare it to, like, the price of a flat in central London, and it's like, yeah, if you just own your own flat, even if it's a 2-bedroom, not a particularly nice 2-bedroom, I actually kind of like this one, it was one I was looking at recently, but if you look at that bathroom, you can have a bathroom like that and be a millionaire, be a high net worth individual. And so what is your biggest consideration when you have a lot of money, but aren't necessarily, because again, your tax difference is at most £22,000 at 137. But if you earn like half of that, as many people will, it's like your tax savings are significant, but not that significant. The bigger ways that you would save taxes are if, for example, you had no estate or inheritance tax. Most governments around the world will tax you not just when you earn money, but as everyone knows, you pay tax when you buy things, including houses, cars. Also, everything in Europe has about a 20% tax rate attached to it. So even when the government takes your, what number did we use before? Once the government takes your 33% of your money, or in this case, it's about 40%, and then when they take another 5% for insurance, they also then say, of that 99 grand you got left over, just so you know, that post-tax money is going to be taxed if you want to do anything with it. Also, every month you got to pay a tax just to live where you live, but that's fine. You know that already, right? There's a lot of taxes you pay on top of it, and the biggest one that I think a lot of people, especially who have a lot of assets, start to get upset about is inheritance tax, because when you die, you have to pay tax on that, or effectively your inheritors pay tax on it, but it means that your thing that you bought is not yours anymore when you die. Instead, the government gets a 1/3 share, which is a big problem for things like businesses and indeed for things like properties, where there are small exceptions, but the exceptions aren't as big as, say, a flat in central London where you will have to pay tax, so your inheritors have to pay tax, something that bothers a lot of people. There's also capital gains tax, which is when you make money because your assets go up in value. This is how basically every billionaire in the world actually makes their money, and this is something which a lot of countries just say, yeah, we don't have that whatsoever. But the bigger one is the idea of a non-territorial tax system. So territorial tax systems are basically saying you can have schemes where you don't pay money on your foreign sourced income. If you think about it this way, right? If you are free to move anywhere in the world, obviously every country wants you to pay tax on the money you earn within their territory. But if you are free to move anywhere, why would a country tax you on the money that you're earning from outside of their borders? If your money, paying tax in the UK is the moral thing to do if you're Starbucks, or even if you're John, right, and you live in Derby, because for you to earn that money that you get from working at the Museum of Making, then you need to rely on British roads that were paid for by British taxpayers. Your healthcare comes from all that thing you've been paying, and the fact that when you get there, all of the infrastructure around you is paid for by British taxpayers, so you should be a British taxpayer too, right? There's an argument that when you live in a country and you derive income from that country doing some things for you, you should pay back the country. But when it comes to very wealthy people, the idea of being a non-dom is quite a common one. I thought this was a UK only thing when we abolished it. If you're not familiar, in the UK until July of this year, and was it July of this year? Shockingly recently, you could be a resident whose permanent home was outside the UK, and if you could prove that, and if you could say you have proof of that, then you would only pay tax on the money earned in the UK. You don't pay tax to the UK government on money made elsewhere in the world unless you pay it into a UK bank account. So if you bring money into the country, or you earn money inside the country, you pay UK taxes, but if you don't, then you wouldn't. You instead pay, weirdly enough, you paid a flat fee every single year, £30,000 every single year, or 60,000. So we're basically saying, we won't charge you a percent, we'll just charge you money to continue not living in the UK permanently, but still as a little benefit. And this sounded really ridiculous to me, because why is it that you pay a flat fee? Why is it that if you are British born, you don't get this tax break that foreigners do? It sounds very unfair, and that's why we ultimately got rid of it. But after looking into this further, lots of countries have them. Here's a list of just 10. Macau, Malaysia, Nicaragua, Singapore. Wow, Singapore is on this list. And I think also, if you look here, Singapore is on this list too. A lot of people are saying, yeah, as much as this was a political decision to scrap the UK's, being able to not pay tax on foreign money, and it's a really good one politically vibing, right? Like saying these people should pay tax on the money they earn is a really good political idea, but the actual reality is they just leave as a result. One of the things that I think is hard to get through most people's political ideologies, apparently I even find it hard in my own, is that you don't tax people based on how much they deserve to pay. Again, you can tax certain numbers of people up until that point. You can decide what people deserve if you really want to, but everyone always has the choice in a free society of saying, no thank you actually, and leaving. And one of the tragic things about this is your willingness and your ability to say, no thank you, I'll just leave, gets higher and higher as your income gets higher, which is why even though the UK population is increasing at its highest rate in literally since the concept of the country, the UK's immigration rate is at its highest ever. We gained over 1 million people this year. We also lost 10,000 high net worth individuals, which I think is I feel like is at least not necessarily a good trade or a bad trade, but it's a bad thing to lose these. You'd ideally have both at the same time, or you'd have these people, you'd rather have 10,000 high net worth individuals over 1 million people who are not necessarily. And the other thing that I think is worth keeping in mind is that, again, ignoring because a lot of people then say, well, why would you want to have people who aren't paying tax? Like, surely if they leave, that's a bummer, but they weren't paying tax while they were here, and ignoring the fact that they do pay a yearly tax, which is higher than, again, here's the UK versus Isle of Man calculator. If you earn the average UK salary, let's say double the average UK salary, more or less, something that I think we can all agree is above that, you would pay less in tax than a year than this person who is from abroad, plus all of the amount that they've got to pay, right? So they're paying $30,000 a year. You're paying, it works out to $23,000 a year if you earn double the UK national average salary. And so they're still paying more, right? There's a higher total. But the actual argument I would make is not that, because I still don't love that. Everyone agrees that even the biggest proponents for a flat tax wouldn't say that government should tax everyone equally. They say government should tax everyone as an equal percent. So within that framework, it's still worth saying, I think you get more money from having high net worth individuals pay nothing in income tax or capital gains, or even if you really want to take the most drastic one, estate and inheritance tax, because by existing in a country, you have to spend taxes and everything. Again, like I mentioned, if you want to go to any restaurant, if you live in Derby but you're not paying taxes, when you go to TGI Fridays, every item on the menu has 20% tax on the bill. Every single time you fill up your car, you're paying a tax on that fuel. It's ridiculous when you work out the percentages of taxes on some things, and it means that even and I guess ultimately you can never avoid tax in its entirety, right? You can avoid one tax, the tax that most people hate the most and that most people really talk about the most when it comes to it, but you can never avoid all of those other ones. And I feel like that is the thing that I think you have to conclude. If you actually want more money for the government because you want more services or whatever, then there are, you can get that money by, you don't have to get that money in the fairest way to have the fairest outcome. And that is an interesting thing. You could have very unfair taxes that result in very fair outcomes, and the reverse is true too. If we changed our tax system to be fairer, to say that foreigners can't get deals that British people cannot, which is I think is a good thing. Like again, the former prime minister's wife could only get the deal because she was born in India. I could not get this deal being born in the UK. I don't have enough money to pay 30 grand a year in taxes to get the deal. But the point, which is another ridiculous point by the way, but but the biggest reason I can't get the deal is because I am British and happen to be born here, even though I have ancestors from outside the country. My place of birth makes me ineligible for a tax cut, which feels unfair and is greatly unfair, which is why the politics of getting rid of it was so easy. But the end result is now there's less money for the government, and so there's less. All of the reasons that make it not fair are different to the reasons for getting it. And so similarly, there are lots of countries that have very, very fair tax rates, you might say. You know, if you're picturing if you picture some of the countries which have the highest tax rates in the world, they might have really fair tax rates like in Cuba, but does that make it a fair society? Not necessarily. The fairness of your inputs and the fairness of your outputs don't have anything to do with each other when you're a government, in the same way that businesses, like some of the scummiest businesses out there, will spend a lot of their money on really good charitable causes, and some of the best feeling businesses out there exclusively use the money for dividends, right? It's how you earn your money and how you spend your money, sadly, are unlinked. And although on a personal level you can make a change towards that, as a government level, you have to admit, unless you are the United States, maybe, where they get to tax people around the world, unless you are the United States of America and you get to say, we'll tax you regardless of where you live in the world, and you can kind of set your own tax rates based on what you feel like and what you think is fair. Outside of there, you have to say, I'm going to tax people what I reasonably think they will pay and not leave based on. Or you get lots of people leaving. And that is a bad thing if lots of people leave, because you do want their money. You would want to have more of their money, but it's better to have less money than no money. Or is it? You tell me in the comments down below. For now, hope you all enjoyed this video, and I hope that you're not leaving the UK if you're a millionaire, or if you are, then give me your house first. Because could you fix the bathroom first though, please? I can't believe you spend $1 million US, you get a bathroom that looks like this. It's a nice place otherwise, right? Like, it's fine. It's got exposed brick walls. It's lovely. It's a bit small though, right? For the price, I feel like you could do better. Also, one bathroom and you gotta walk all the way out of your bedroom all the way over there. Also, the size of this room, is that really even a bedroom at that size? I want to go look at it. You know, sorry, this video's, it's basically over. Don't worry. But as always, I hope you enjoy it. It's a small living room too, really. You know, maybe this isn't the dream flat. Maybe I've got to be more than a millionaire to live in a nice flat in London. Anyway, the point here is to say I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, then... Ooh, fast internet. If you did, then I'll see you in the next one. Or I won't. I've got to make a competitive offer, or I won't see you next time. I don't rely on your support. But if you want me to rely on yours, you can go to patreon.com/toycat. Yeah, smooth. Nice.